Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and today we have a new guest to the show, and his name is Theo Fleury. So for those of you that don't know Theo Fleury, he is a former professional NHL hockey player. Theo played for the Calgary Flames, Colorado Avalanche, New York Rangers, and Chicago Blackhawks in the NHL. Theo scored over 1,000 points in his career, placing him 61st in career NHL scoring, and won the Stanley Cup in 1989 with the Flames. Theo is also a best-selling author, and he co-wrote a book called Playing with Fire. The book documents how he became a star player, Stanley Cup Champion, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, despite battling drug addictions that ultimately ended his NHL career. So Theo, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Always enjoyed talking to people. That's for sure.
So Theo, let's kind of get rolling here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up in Canada? How did hockey come into your life? And what was it like to be part of a championship team and win the Stanley Cup?
Geez, where do I even start? I grew up in a home where both my parents, were dealing with some childhood trauma stuff, and it was disguised as an addiction. And addiction is a coping mechanism used to suppress emotional pain and suffering. So I grew up in a lot of chaos and insanity and you name it. And so at 5 years old, I walked down to the local rink and put my skates on for the first time and stepped on the ice and fell head over heels in love with the game of hockey. And then shortly after that, I moved to a fairly small town in northern Manitoba called Russell, Manitoba, which is right on the Yellowhead Highway and the 83 highway, which goes all the way to Mexico. So it's kind of a thriving little town with lots of people, coming and going and whatever. But, when I got to this little town, it just so happened that the 13 best athletes in this little town of 1,500 people were all my age. And not only that, we had three incredible fathers who became our coaches. And, we spent the next 9 years together creating this environment and this team that would enjoy a tremendous amount of success. And it was built on three things: respect, love and caring for your teammates, and consequences. And it really was like the foundation and laid the groundwork for the rest of my life. And there was 13 sets of parents as well who sort of all bought into this concept. And what it did was create 13 incredible men who are contributing every day to this planet. And, I believe that, minor sports or kids sports is completely out of control and out of hand because everybody thinks their kid's going to, maybe someday have a professional career in whatever they choose. And the simple fact in hockey is there's only 700 jobs. That's it. There's no more jobs. And the fact that most of those jobs are taken by NHL superstars, which have 2 or 3 on every team and are locked into long-term contracts. We have 9.5 million kids worldwide playing for maybe 60 jobs a year, and that's it. There's no more jobs, right? And so we've created a culture, of entitled, brats, basically, right? And the real reason why we should put our kids in sports is to create quality human beings, first and foremost. That should be the number one goal. And, that's been lost in some way, shape, or form. So I grew up in this incredible environment. And, when I was 15 years old, I was drafted into the Western Hockey League and started my professional career at 15 years old, hoping someday to make it to the ultimate goal, which was the NHL, which I accomplished in 1989. I got called up on New Year's Eve of 1988, arrived in Calgary January 1st, and then 6 months later was carrying the Stanley Cup around the Montreal Forum. So, I achieved two of my goals, almost immediately in my professional career. First one was to make the NHL, and then secondly was to win a Stanley Cup. And and then just went on to have an incredible 15-year career, and played with some of the greatest players the game's ever produced, some of the greatest leaders the game's ever produced, and it was beyond my wildest dreams. You dream about playing in the NHL, but when you actually get there and realize how incredible that experience is, and like I said, the biggest takeaway for me was the quality of people that I got to associate with on a daily basis that really helped me post career and build something amazing after hockey, and I would say I'm more proud of where I am post career than I was during my career.
Well, Theo, thanks for taking the time there to dive a little deep and kind of bring out how you were introduced to hockey. And I really admire too that you spoke about the culture, as well as really what it should be about, which is quality experiences. And you've done some great work post career, and I'm really excited to carry that discussion with you today.
Mm-hmm.
But before we go there, being one of the smallest players in the NHL, some hockey fans believe that you were biggest underdog. You were 5'6" winger and played at a time where big men and enforcers dominated the game of hockey. Right. How did you prove that size did not matter?
Well, when I look in the mirror, I don't see somebody who's small, right? I look at somebody who's, incredibly talented, God-given ability, but the thing that people don't measure, is the size of your heart, how much courage you have, the will to win, the will to compete. You can't, there's no tests for that. It just has to happen. People have to visually see that. And and so, I wasn't supposed to play one game in the National Hockey League, and I think I played over 1,100 games, including playoffs, 1,150 some games, including playoffs, where I averaged a point a game for my whole entire career. And so and I always tell kids that are have potential to be drafted that it doesn't matter what number you get picked, because I think I was picked like 472 in the draft, because the first year of eligibility, 12 rounds went by and I didn't get picked. And then the following year, I went 166th overall to the Calgary Flames. And so, I see being a draft pick as an opportunity. That's all it is. You have to actually go show up and prove that, you can play. And so, I got my chance in 1987, went to my first training camp, where pretty much everybody in the organization believed that I would not play one game in the National Hockey League. And by the time I left that training camp, I turned all those non-believers into believers. And Christmas time that year, I signed my first professional hockey contract, and the rest is basically history.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I like how you touched upon too, saying that you had such a big heart and you had a lot of courage. I know a lot of people think of you as, you had a heart of a lion, right? You were just so tough to play against, just so hardworking.
I think I've had a lot of time to reflect on, the majority of my life and all the obstacles I faced early on in my life, with my parents, and then the sexual abuse, and then everybody telling me that, I was too small. What really happened was it built this incredible resilience inside of me. And it was that resilience that everybody saw night in and night out, was this guy that, was going to continue to prove people wrong his whole entire life. And so, a lot of people look at adversity as, a burden or a crutch or whatever it is. And to me, I really look at it as a gift. I thank the universe every day for that kind of adversity, because, it made me very successful in my life. And I look at the world today and where we're headed and where this is all going. And I have no fear, right? I have no fear because I faced, the ultimate adversity in my life. And, it's like, there isn't anything you can throw at me now that I haven't faced already. And I will always be successful no matter what happens. And, I will figure it out. I always have, and I always will. And it was, it was those experiences early in my childhood that, made me the person that I am today, which is an incredibly resilient, opinionated, strong, courageous person.
Absolutely. Being able to conquer fear is a huge step, right? And as you kind of mentioned, you've done that in many areas, both professionally and as well as personally. But going to my next question, you had mentioned in your intro, you play with some of the greatest hockey players of all time, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Joe Sakic. What do you believe separates a good hockey player from a great hockey player?
Between their ears, that's when you get to the highest level, everybody can play, right? Everybody has the basic fundamentals to play the game. And what separates, greatness from average is what's between your ears, how you handle stress, how you handle pressure, how you treat people. And, those three guys that you mentioned, and, there was probably 100 of those guys when I was around, is they were incredibly humble. And whether you were a stick boy or the general manager of the team or the owner of the team, these particular people treated everybody as an equal and made everybody feel part of what, the end goal was. And that was winning Stanley Cups or gold medals or World Juniors or whatever it is. And so, having the opportunity to, to witness and have a relationship with these particular people, it just rubs off on you, right? You can't help but take a lot of their qualities and then implement them into your, into your own life. And so, I would say, apart from winning all those championships and being part of those teams, the thing for me was, the takeaways that I got from hanging around the greatest leaders of our sport, and you can put Mark Messier in there and Stevie Yzerman and Lanny McDonald and, Dougie Gilmore, you name it, these people, are quality human beings. And, when you hang around with quality human beings, it's just going to rub off on you, it's like almost like osmosis, and, for me, that's what I appreciate probably the most, more than anything else, is the opportunity to hang around with quality people.
And that actually makes me think of a podcast interview that you did, I think about a year ago with Canadian politician Maxime Bernier. You basically said that you played with some of the best leaders in hockey, and that has taught you a lot about even just leaders in life. And in your opinion, what do you think can be applied to make a great leader, whether it's in sports or life?
Well, it's first respect. It's probably the most important thing, that every single human being matters. That when you meet people, you look them in the eye and you shake their hand and, ask them about their life, their family, these type of things that really matter to people. Humility is huge, that, greatness is about humility. It's not about talking about yourself. It's about talking about, the people that made you successful, that taught you lessons and all that. And, there's very little ego, when I talk about true leadership. And the thing about ego is, if you lead with ego, eventually everybody hates your guts, right? And I've seen it many, many times, over my lifetime. And it's the people who lead with humility, compassion, empathy, care, love, all those things. People will follow you to the ends of the earth if you project that, to people. And there's a lot of inspiration in people who do that. And obviously we live in a world right now where we have I would say from top to bottom, a group of people who lead with ego. Right? It's all about them. And it's sort of a narcissistic, type of leadership. And, as you can see, when from top to bottom, we have that kind of leadership, what does it create? It creates chaos and drama and anxiety and fear and all these things. And so, it's the greatest threat to humanity is this kind of leadership. And we know that, this ideology that they're selling to us every single day has been tried 24 times on our planet, and 24 times it's failed. And, the only byproduct that it spits out is death. Right. And, it's sad that, that your life and my life don't matter more. Matter at all. It's about them getting to the top of the pyramid, and have the most power, right? Which is addictive behavior. Power is an addiction, right? And I believe it's probably one of the worst addictions you can have, is because you lose all sense of humanity, you lose all sense of compassion, you lose all sense of empathy. And, the only thing you're trying to do on a daily basis is acquire more power, because if you have more power, then you can control more people. But ultimately, what it tells me is that you yourself are out of control. And, you, for whatever reason, most likely through your childhood experiences, there's a gap there where somebody treated you, poorly, abused you physically, emotionally, spiritually, and it's left a huge void in your life where the only thing that matters is you and how do I get to the top. And I've never walked in those circles. I don't know that that kind of addiction.
Absolutely. I also know another word that you've used to describe a good leader is accountability.
Yeah, it's huge. And that's the third thing, that I learned playing hockey as a young kid, that I'm responsible for my choices, my actions and decisions. And there's consequences, when I step out of line. Right. And, the lack of accountability, on the planet right now is the reason why we're in the position that we are, is lack of accountability. Everybody's in on the con, right? Everybody's in on the con. And, there's a lot of people being, a lot of people's voices are being suppressed. Anybody that, holds these people to account, you never get the right answer. You get word salad, you get shit that doesn't make sense. When they're at the podium, Trudeau, for perfect example, the reporter asking Trudeau about, what he does and what his family does to, sort of contribute to climate. And, he says paper water bottle thingies, right? Which is, I don't know. It's interesting to watch these people when they step up to the stump and spew, word salad that doesn't make sense at all. And you're just going, wow, no wonder we're in the state that we're in.
So Theo, I have one last question on hockey, and then we're going to transition to a different topic here. But who was the best hockey coach you ever had? And what qualities do you believe make a great coach?
Well, I've had all different kinds of coaches, had the rah motivational guys, had the X's and O guys, had the cerebral guys, so I preferred the less technical, more motivational type coaches, because that's how I was sort of built. But I took something from every experience coaching and implemented into my life. So is there one coach that stands out? Not really. I always talk about Terry Crisp, because he was the guy that ultimately gave me the first opportunity to play in the NHL. And I made a lot of mistakes early on, and he somehow believed in me and allowed me to make those mistakes. And as long as I was learning from those mistakes and not repeating those mistakes, but I really believe he saw the upside, that the upside was more valuable than the downside. And so every time I see him, I always thank him for, giving me an opportunity when nobody else in the game was willing to do that. And, like I said, I was able to make mistakes and ultimately become, a 15-year, NHL player who had a tremendous amount of success.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that experience. So Theo, you co-wrote a book called Playing with Fire. I'm actually looking forward to reading it. I know it is a bestseller, but what inspired you to write this book? What can someone learn from reading it?
When I retired from the game, all I had was a grade 12 diploma from Vanier Collegiate in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And, it was barely a 65C average that I achieved in high school. And so basically, the first 6 years after retirement was filled with, a lot of uncertainty, and I didn't really know where I sort of fit in the world post hockey career. And so I was approached by somebody who was interested in writing a book, and I was still in that sort of transition, trying to figure out, what is my purpose in life post hockey career. And and writing the book ultimately changed my life forever, and it really sort of fast tracked me into what I'm doing today. And so it was an incredible experience writing the book, and then going out on the book tour, and then becoming a speaker and facilitator. And so it was really and ultimately, I needed to tell the truth, about my life, because everybody was kind of guessing, and the thing is, I suffered from mental illness from a very young age, and nobody was talking about it, or we didn't know anything about it. And ultimately, that's what ended my career. It was not my addiction. It was, I could no longer manage, my mental illness, which was disguised as an addiction, right? And a lot of people were quick to judge, quick to point the finger, and all those things. And so I needed to sort of set the record straight. And And like I said, what happened was, it gave me this whole new purpose and outlook on life and a reason to get out of bed every day. And yeah, it's been the greatest work of my life.
That's beautiful. Thanks for kind of giving a background there on the book. I know I said this before, but something that I truly admire about you that stands out is you really do have a heart of a lion. It took great courage to share your story. You have inspired millions of people to heal, overcome trauma, and open up about their mental health challenges as well. But more importantly, you've created a safe space for people to understand that they are not alone. In 2013, you created the Victor Walk. What exactly is this movement?
Well, before I headed out onto the book tour, I knew nothing. I literally knew nothing. All I had was my story. And, it's when I went out on the book tour that I started to run into, thousands of people who had the same story as me. And like I said, it sort of catapulted me into this career that I have now. And it was, I was being educated on the fly, and, the significance of sexual abuse on the planet is, at a catastrophic level, from human trafficking to, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, domestic violence, you name it. Like it's one of the biggest epidemics on the planet that nobody talks about, because there's so much shame and there's so much guilt. There's so many negative emotions attached to it. And as a society, we've done a really poor job of allowing people to talk about this kind of stuff. Right. And, it's kind of the underbelly of society that everybody's full of shame about, that we've allowed it to happen, and we've allowed it to get to this level that it's at. And so to be that person who people look at as a person who fully understands, who's not going to judge, who's not going to point the finger, I'm just here to listen to all of these stories. And I would say, 9 times out of 10, I don't even have to give advice. It's just a matter of being present, attuned, and, listening to the story. And that's what writing the book, produced, was all of these survivors of traumatic childhood experiences. And, now they're adults, struggling with mental illness, struggling with addiction, struggling with relationships, lack of spirituality, lack of emotional health, lack of physical health. All of these things are a byproduct of experiencing trauma in your life. And so, even though I'm out there, trying to teach people, I'm still, working on my own stuff at the same time. And so, but, I'm 1,000% better than I was when I started this journey. And it's all those people that have come to me that, that I've learned probably the most from, is working with people similar to myself. Right.
Absolutely. And you know what? It makes me think of a famous author, James Clear. He talks about, being 1% better every day, right? And you can apply this in many areas of your life, but I know you've described the healing process as a journey, right? And you don't know when you're going to get to the final destination, or the fact that you created that outlet for yourself as well as other people in the world to feel togetherness, I think is pretty powerful. So moving to my next question, any emotional or psychological traumatic event, big or small, can negatively impact someone's mental health and bring a lot of pain, disrupting the ability to function normally in day-to-day life. So what are some of the mental fitness tools to help you cope with trauma and move forward to live a great life?
It's such a big, huge question, right? So I would say there are 10,000 different ways to heal. Okay. And sort of the journey or the process is trying as many of those 10,000 ways to get to a place where you have a daily routine, right? And we talk about this in addiction all the time, is it's one day at a time, right? And, they say if you think about the past, that's depression. You think about the future, that's anxiety. Well, we don't know what the future looks like right now. So the vibration on the planet is one of fear, and fear creates anxiety, right? And being an empath, I feel energy. And so when I walk out the door every day, I'm almost knocked over by the amount of anxiety and fear that is on, the planet, that's vibrating right now. And so, the things that work for me is working with other people. That's probably the biggest thing that helps me, because when I'm helping somebody else, I'm not in my own head, and mental illness is all here, right? And the worst place you can be is sort of trapped inside of your own head, trying to figure it out on your own. Well, every time that I tried to do this on my own, it was like the biggest shit show on the planet when I was trying to do it alone. And now that I have, many people around me, that's the key, is finding your tribe of people that can help you heal, and you also helping them heal at the same time. And, and like I said, it's a lifelong journey, but it's basically comes out to three things: my physical health, my emotional health, and my spiritual health. And those are the three categories that need, the most attention, and they need it on a daily basis. It's not a once in a while thing. It's an everyday thing that needs to happen for your physical, emotional and spiritual, well-being. And nobody talks about this stuff. That's the biggest problem. And the thing about emotional pain is you can't see it, right? You can't see emotional pain, but you can see it in some of the behaviors, right? Addiction, anger, rage, depression, you can see it, but there's very few people that can pick up on, that emotional pain that you're feeling, right? Because we're really good at wearing lipstick, right? I call it lipstick. We're really good at presenting ourselves as everything is, that 4-letter word, fine, right? And so, but once you get underneath that and talk about the pain, release the pain, all of those things, then you're on your path, you're on your journey of healing. It's actually saying, hey, I'm not doing well and I need help, right? The hardest thing to do is ask for help, right? But it's also the most courageous thing you can do. And I always say all the time, there's no courage in judgment, right? It doesn't take any courage to point the finger at somebody else. And what you're doing is you're basically pointing the finger back at yourself, saying, you know what, I'm higher and mighty, but I'm also suffering as well. So, but ultimately, we need to do a better job of creating environments and spaces for people to come together and share their deepest, darkest secrets, right? You're only as sick as your secrets, right? And, in 2009, when I came out with the book, I told the world all my secrets, and then I didn't have to carry them around anymore. And then what happened was everybody else who had the same secret as me gravitated towards me and told me their secret. And so, it's the old Vidal Sassoon commercial, right? Two friends that told two friends, and so on and so on and so on, right? And that's basically, what's happened is, this word of mouth marketing sort of, which is the cheapest and most effective kind of marketing, has happened, right? And now I'm sought out as being one of those really safe people that can help somebody get to where they want to go.
And that's amazing. Yeah, I've never heard that analogy about the whole, lipstick, but it reminds me of the other analogy that people talk about, which is wearing that mask, right? Whether you're a man or a woman, or is wearing that mask, right? Hiding what's really happening inside of you. and being afraid to be vulnerable, right? Being afraid to be judged. And luckily, there are some people now coming out and doing powerful talks. I know Renee Brown is actually one of them, as well as yourself. And that's kind of my next question here is, vulnerability is strength and it is not a weakness. Being vulnerable can help someone work through their emotions rather than pushing them away. Vulnerability fosters good emotional and mental health. And vulnerability, I believe, is a sign of courage. So Theo, how can someone embrace vulnerability as their greatest strength and not a weakness?
Well, part of the stigma is exactly what you said. Vulnerability is weakness, right? And that's sort of been ingrained subliminally for centuries, right? What we watch on TV and, all these things and how, people have been coached in, kids' environments is simply that. And so, being an advocate and an activist in this space, all day long, all I do is fight through stigma, right? Because people are afraid of vulnerability. Like some people are just paralyzed by, the word. And, but, I've seen the greatest strides happen when people are vulnerable, right? People get up on stage and tell their story. That's the ultimate in vulnerability, is being able to talk about those deepest, darkest secrets and then connect on a spiritual level, right? Because that's what vulnerability does, is it creates a spiritual connection with, a person in your audience or a person who's listening, to this podcast, is that, I'm not afraid to talk about the dark stuff, right? And the dark stuff is what made me, incredibly successful human being, is the adversity that I faced, which turned into resilience. And that's the attraction, right? That's the, it's about attraction, not promotion, right? There's a lot of people out there in the space that I'm in that can really talk a good game, but are they actually living what they're talking about? You know what I mean? And so yeah, vulnerability is a scary place for a lot of people because of the marketing that has happened around, the subject of vulnerability.
Absolutely. So Theo, men and women who come of age without being nurtured or without learning how to nurture themselves have a hole that they carry inside of them. Some people fill this hole with drugs, sex, or alcohol. Mm-hmm. Others fill it with violence, but it gets filled one way or another. You have shared before that you used to have an alcohol, drug, and sex addiction. How did you remove these toxic habits and behaviors from your life?
Yeah. Well, it's those three things I talked about, spiritual wellness, emotional wellness, physical wellness are all part of it, right? Because, I was using those to mask the emotional pain that I was feeling, right? Sadness, anger, rage, self-loathing, self-sabotage, self-destruction, all those things. And so yeah, that I would say those are the three most important things you need to work on in order to overcome, that addictive behavior that fills that hole inside of you. But, when you go down that road and you go down that path, eventually, you get to that ultimate place of decision, right? Am I going to die or am I going to live? And I would say most people want to live, but they don't have the formula for living their best life, right? And so, when we're struggling physically, which is a byproduct of trauma, like, the stress on your body, what, how you eat, how you sleep, all of those things are going to affect you, emotionally, right? And then, you already have emotional pain, and now you're feeling the physical pain and the emotional pain, and you need something to, relieve that. That's why most of us gravitate towards, the dark side of life. But eventually, the dark side stops working, right? And every single person in our life who's, sort of been on this journey with us, we've exhausted them and we've made them sick. And so they go and, have to look after themselves. And then we're ultimately left alone, right? And when we're left alone, that's that proverbial rock bottom place where we make the choice, right? Am I going to live or am I going to die? Well, we know, in the addiction space that, that's a long, painful, lonely existence, and so, we make that choice where we decide we want to be sober one day at a time and do whatever we can on a daily basis, because it's one day at a time. That's it, and one day at a time really gets us focused into trying being present in the moment, which is really, 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 really hard, right? Unless you want to go to Tibet and sit on the side of a mountain for 6 months with a teacher, that's that's the ultimate in being present. But, not a lot of people want to, commit to that kind of work, but it is ultimately, it's that kind of work that gets us, to where we want to go.
Absolutely. And you know what? I like it that you keep to those 3 areas of the wellness wheel. Physically, that you're secure in that area, as well as spiritually, as well as emotionally. Yeah. I also believe too, there's actually other areas too where you also want to be grounded, financially and your environment.
But I find when you take care of those three things, everything else falls into place, right? Everything falls into place. Like all those other things that sit outside the emotional, physical, and spiritual space. I find that if you're doing well in those 3 areas, everything else, takes care of itself. Like sustainability, like that's sustainability that sits on the outside, right? And you have to be very careful, when you're out there trying to seek sustainability, that you make sure that you take care of the 3 most important things first. Because if you're out there, there's an addiction called work, right? And so there has to be a balance, right? And I was at the highest end of the spectrum in earnings, right? But at that time, I was at the most miserable place in my life, right? So, there's a balance, and there's, you have to define what is your sustainability, what makes you happy, what makes you content, what makes you less fearful, all those things. So there has to be a balance there. And that's part of, the healing journey, is learning what that balance is and what's most important in your life.
I like that perspective, because those 3 areas focus on filling up your cup of water first before filling up someone else's, right? You can't go to work, or you can't think about those other areas unless you're nurturing yourself. So
ultimately that's what happens. It comes down to you, right? And relationship, right? And the one relationship I neglected the most was the one I had with myself, because I was just running away all the time, right? That fight or freeze response, right? Most people live in that space, right? So it's finding, and what's the ultimate goal in this journey is peace, joy, happiness, and serenity. That's where we're trying to get to, which is really, really, really hard.
Absolutely. And I like the fact too that you brought up, living day to day, because it reminds me of a quote from a mentor that I have, which is, learn from your past, but live the present, and plan for the future. So you're focused on living the present, but you understand that the other 2 are part of your life, but really we're focusing on the present. So day to day. Yeah,
because, being present and focusing on becoming a better human being is a good space to be, and the past is there to teach us lessons that aren't repeated, right?
we're human beings. We're supposed to make mistakes. It's the only way we learn is by making mistakes. And, when you embrace the pain from your past and bring it into your present, it's all about helping other people, right? It is sharing those experiences with people, right? So that they don't make the same mistakes you did.
Absolutely. No, for sure. So Theo, who is the most influential person in your life and how has this person impacted you?
I think every single person that comes into my life has had an impact, yeah, I wouldn't say that there's one particular person that stands out in the crowd. But there have been lots of people who've made an impact on my life, and there will continue to be people, that come into my life that make an impact, because, I always go into each situation or each relationship always saying, I want to learn more from you than I can teach you, right? Because there's a reason why you're in my life. It's because I need to learn something from you. Whether you learn something from me or not, I hope that you do. But ultimately, I need to learn something from you, and that's why you're here, and that's why we've been put in, the same path and the same journey.
I agree. So Theo, as you know, the purpose of this podcast is to inspire people to achieve greatness and enhance their overall personal well-being. What is your definition of greatness?
Humility, compassion, and empathy. I lived in the egocentric space for a long time, being a professional athlete, where everybody was, blowing smoke up your ass 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, you maybe thought you were better than what you were. And so, like I said, mental illness is here, and everything and all the learning stuff comes from the heart space, right? And those of us who get into the heart space, that's where all the good stuff lives: compassion, empathy, all the forgiveness, all these, incredible lessons that we need to learn. But if we're in here, we can't get to there, right? And that's ultimately what mental illness is all about, is, living in here. And, the brain is designed for survival. And 9 times out of 10, what the brain is telling us is never going to happen. It's not part of our reality. But what's in our heart is, the important things, the lessons that we need to learn. And if we come from a place of heart, that's where the peace and the joy and the happiness and the serenity, that's where it lives. And so we need to tap into that more, right? And, because if you look at where we are right now, the energy where we're at right now, it's very volatile. It's very choose a side, and there's no more middle, right? You're either left or you're right. There's no middle. And people have, firmly planted themselves into that, what they believe, right? And so there is no room for dialogue. There's no room to bring everybody back to the middle, right? And the only way we're going to get back to the middle is by getting into the heart space, right? And listen with compassionate ears, empathetic ears, and non-judgmental, so.
It's a beautiful definition. And I think you also hit on some great points there about how there's a lot of division, and
yeah.
Any great individual that I think has achieved greatness, it's not about the me, it's about the we. And I know that's a little cheesy, but even like people like Kobe Bryant, he was big about that. He was big about, if I'm not making other people around me better, then I'm not actually choosing to live.
Well, you're not fulfilling your purpose, because I really believe that's everybody's purpose is, there's so much pain and suffering on the planet, right? And it takes, so much compassion, empathy, forgiveness, but you also have to be doing it yourself. If you're teaching it, you better be doing it yourself, right? And yeah, so when we overcome the division, when we overcome the hostility, the chaos, and the drama, and get back to that, those core beliefs of physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, that's when things are going to change. And, me being a patriot and a freedom fighter, that's what I want for everybody, right? Is that, yeah, choose whatever you want, but don't make me choose between, I want to live in, in that space where, I get to come up with my own beliefs and my own ideologies and my own philosophies and all of that. But we should all be allowed to be in the same room and have our own beliefs and philosophies and whatever, right? Because that's how we learn, right? We learn because of different perspectives, right? And, right now it's like, it's not there.
So Theo, who is a future guest that you would like to see on this show?
On your show?
Absolutely.
I wrote my second book with a pretty remarkable human being who I believe is probably one of the smartest people on the planet, who lives, breathes, pain and suffering on the planet more than her. And her name is Kim Barthel. And she would be an incredible guest for you to have, on your podcast, because, I believe that she is a knowledge keeper and a change artist, and brings a really cool perspective with that compassionate, empathetic, lens that we so badly need right now. And she's a leader.
That's awesome. So I will add her to my list. And when the day comes, I will let you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
That episode is ready for you to listen to it, and we will do our best to lead another courageous and inspiring conversation. Theo, where is the best place, for people to, connect with you online, or if they want to reach out to you, or where's the best place to go?
Yeah. So my website is theofleury.life. And I'm on the 4 main social media platforms. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So, and I always put it out there whenever I'm on a podcast. If you are struggling and you have nobody to talk to, please message me on either on my website or on social media. And I guarantee I will get back to you within the day.
Awesome. Great, Theo. So I'll make sure to put that in the notes, and Theo will get back to you. He got back to me when I wrote him on Instagram, and I really appreciate that, Theo. It made me realize that anything is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to him. And I want to just take the last moment here, Theo, to really thank you for being here today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for, sharing your story. Thank you again for being so courageous. And yeah, I know a lot of people listening have probably really enjoyed this episode. So yeah, once again, it was a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Ben. Like I said earlier, I love talking about, this subject and this topic, and hopefully today we created another safe space, for people who are struggling out there, who need help, right? It's okay to ask for help, and in my experience, when I've asked for help, there's always been somebody there, that was willing to, go on this journey as well.
Thank you for listening to the Living Your Greatness podcast. If this show has added value, please subscribe, leave a rating, and make a review.